Hey, deserving listeners, I thought I would answer some of your emails. Anonymous middle tier patron emailed in and she said, I would appreciate your perspective on emotional infidelity in long-term monogamous couples. I have recently discovered my male partner of 5 years, whom I live with, has been engaging in an extremely close friendship with a female coworker that has gone on for years and has escalated over the past several months entirely outside of my knowledge. I initially expressed concern about this person and was assured by him, by my husband, that there was nothing to worry about. However, for the past few weeks, my partner has become extremely distant from me and began questioning our relationship. He assured me that what he was going through had nothing to do with me. So it sounds like she's saying that her partner, has been distant, but doesn't have to do with the relationship. Okay. Meaning that he says he's stressed or something. I discovered a text thread of him telling his friend, this woman at work, I believe, his friend, intimate things that he thinks about her, going so far as to say he loves her more than once. He has assured me that this is platonic love that comes from a place of deep care. All right, just chiming in here. Yeah, it's possible, but if true, then why hide it? Now, for some people, they might have a genuine platonic love and relationship with someone, and they hide it because they either accurately or inaccurately predict that their partner would be unreasonably controlling of that. So, there's a possibility, but, it certainly looks shady, especially in the way that you're describing it going on. He is protective of their friendship and will not cut off contact with her, claiming that would make him even more obsessive about their relationship. He swears there is no physical attraction whatsoever, but I'm not sure how much that matters to me anymore, as emotional closeness feels bad enough. How do couples get past a major breach of trust like this? I feel like I want to believe him, but when I'm alone, my mind convinces me that I am making a mistake and trying to repair our relationship. Thank you so much for any and all perspectives. End of email. Yeah, well, it's really hard for me to know the landscape. There's a possibility on one end of the spectrum that he is pulling the wool over your eyes, and he absolutely is having not only a platonic and emotional affair, but a full-on physical affair as well. Sometimes when people are caught in an affair, but only caught on the emotional side, then they will deny the sexual side. So that's possible. On the other end of the spectrum, or I don't know if it's a spectrum, but very far away from that possibility, is that he genuinely is just in a friendship. I have friends of all genders, and they don't threaten my relationship with Stacy. So, there's nothing wrong with a man, heterosexual man, having a platonic friendship, even if it's very deep, with a woman coworker. So, not everyone agrees with that, but that's certainly the way certainly it's not immoral or inherently a problem. There are literally people that will say that men and women can't be friends. Like it's impossible because men will always want to have sex with a woman, which I just find to just be the dumbest, most pigeonholing, degrading thing, that men are just like completely at the mercy of their of a sexual drive that is cartoonish, right? Like, anyway, now, might that be a problem? Might two heterosexual people, male and female, be friends, and the male is it's hard for him not to be sexually attracted? Yeah, that happens. But anyway, so that's another possibility, is that it is the way he describes it, and he is just going through a stressful time that has nothing to do with you or the friend, and he feels distant because of that. It's also possible that you're leaving out the part where you're being controlling or something, and or unreasonable, or he unreasonably predicts that you're going to be controlling when you wouldn't be. Another possibility is that he is having an emotional affair but is in denial of it himself, and he consciously frames it as a friendship when in fact it is romantic in nature. What do we call romantic in nature? Saying I love you for a lot of people is romantic, but for some not. I tell my platonic friends that I love them. I tell my family members I love them. So not all the time does love mean romantic relationships. You're saying, though, that it doesn't really matter because it hurts that your partner is drifting away from you, but getting closer to this other person. So let's say it is absolutely a friendship. You could still be hurt by that. You could still be worried and concerned about that. Now, certainly if you tell this story, particularly I'm just going to take a guess as a couples therapist that if I were to talk with him, the spin would be very different. And if I talked with his friend, the spin would be very different. I don't know that for sure, obviously, but whenever I hear someone's account of their partner, I have learned to know that there's another side of the story. It doesn't mean that your story, anonymous patron, is wrong. It just means that there's a lot of potential nuance. Now, there might not be. Now, if I were to talk with your partner, he might tell me even worse things. So it might even be even worse for him when he tells me his side of the story. So I'm not saying his side of the story would make him look better. I just don't know. So, it's just hard to tell. But the bottom line is that you feel a trust violation and a distance, and you deserve to have that addressed. That's hurtful, it's lonely, it's scary, and he should rise to the occasion. He should do what he can within reason. Now, maybe there's something in his life, independent of you or his friend, that is preventing him from having the energy to do that, but he should explain that thoroughly or make up for it later or something like that. So there's a lot of unknowns, but bottom line, you deserve to have this addressed. Now, if you talk to random people about this, friends, family, people on the internet, they will tell you undoubtedly that you are stupid to believe that he's not having an affair or something along those lines. And that advice is stupid because that is ignoring nuance. Even if you were being duped by him, which is absolutely possible, that doesn't make you stupid, and it doesn't mean that you're supposed to take quick action. It's possible, but you just don't know. And you are probably emailing into me because the people around you probably don't give you great advice. They give you probably very simplistic advice of leave him. But you don't want to do that yet, which is most of the time, most people in your shoes will feel that way about it and have nowhere to turn. And by the way, just a little tip, if anyone ever comes to you in your life or on the internet and talks about a story like this, avoid falling into that trap of just providing a very simple answer. You need to break up with him. You need a divorce. You need to quit that job. You need to move out of that city, or you need to sell that house. There's very quick responses because to the listener, it resolves their anxiety because they don't have to think about it. They're just like, look, I have anxiety because I don't know what's happening. It sounds like you're being cheated on, but I don't really know. And the easiest way for me as a listener is if you break up with that person, then I don't have to deal with this anymore. That's why people do it in my estimation. But anyway, so yeah, I don't know. Obviously a couples therapist would help, but it requires your partner to be truthful or to know themselves is another issue. But you deserve to communicate this to your partner and just be like, hey, I don't know what's happening between, I'll take your word for it that it's a friendship and you deserve to have friendships and I'm not going to get in the way of that. But independent of that, I feel distant from you and I feel lonely and I feel scared that I'm going to lose you. And when I'm distant from you, so I'm just going to take a guess, anonymous patron, to say that if you had a very secure relationship with him, that you would not be threatened by this other person. That's always the thing to think about. Instead of focusing on, is he texting her? What's going on? Is she attracted to him? That's usually what people will obsess about. What the need that's being perturbed in you is the need for closeness and the need for security, which you deserve to have. So if you address that head on, then it might go better. Because if you talk about this friend, even if it is on the borderline of emotional infidelity, he might not see it that way, or it might be hard for him to admit that to himself. So it might be hard to have a conversation with him about that and be on the same page. But if you say, I feel distant, I don't feel close to you, I don't feel secure, I don't feel reassured that you're a secure partner that loves me and is dedicated to me, then that's something that it's not up for debate. It's up for debate as to whether or not he's having an affair. It's not up to debate that you're lonely and scared. And so you can talk with him directly about that. But obviously having a therapist will help. Okay, this next email is from middle tier patron Caitlin from Richmond. She says, From your content, I know there are few things that will send you on a tangent quicker than gender generalizations. Just chiming in here. If you don't watch my reaction videos, in these reaction videos, there are times when people on these reality shows or otherwise will make these claims that women are like this and men are like that. And it's become an inside joke on the channel that whenever anyone does that, I roll my eyes and have to chime in and comment on it and say that there's no science to back up that notion. People will say things like, well, daughters and their mothers, they're always fighting all the time. And there's no data to back that up. It's fine if that's what happened to you. It's also fine if you know a lot of women who fought with their mothers. But that does not constitute a reality regarding gender and relationships. So I will frequently chime in because those ideas usually are oppressive and demeaning to people. Like, I have trauma around it myself because there will be like I was saying earlier, like people will say, well, men, they're always wanting to have sex and they can't be friends with women because they'll always want to have sex with them. And I find that to be incredibly insulting to me, just incredibly insulting. One, because it's insulting. Two, because I have many, many women friends that I'm very close to. Lita, who I started the podcast with Umberto 15 years ago, has been a best friend of mine for years and years. We became very close in high school, but I've known her since preschool. So you're telling me that I can't be friends with Lita because I want to constantly have sex with her? Or that means I'm not a real man. So, fuck off, really. Like, stop that. It's not okay. It's not okay. Now, men aren't an oppressed class of people. So, we could bring up a lot of other examples of, women, they're better mothers than men are. Mothers are better parents than mothers are soft and fathers are hard. And that's not only, it's oppressive to everyone. It denies men the opportunity to be who they are and denies women the opportunity to be, sort of pigeonholes women that now they're forced to be that tender person when maybe they should spread that tenderness around. Maybe all parents should provide tenderness. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, I'm just talking about. So anyway, that's what Caitlin is talking about. That I will go on a tangent like I'm doing right now, going on with the email. I'm wondering how you navigate that in a clinical setting when the patient is from a more patriarchal culture with strict gender norms and roles. I've recently encountered this in my clinical setting, and I've been working really hard to ride the fine line between respecting the cultural differences while also providing patient-centered feedback. End of email. Yeah, well, in the clinical setting, when I'm talking with clients or I'm talking with colleagues or students, I don't react or talk the way I do on this podcast or the YouTube channel. I want that to be very, very clear. If I had a client, especially a newish client, who said something like that, like, I wouldn't be surprised if I have heard the following phrase dozens of times in my office, where someone will say, a woman, she'll say, I'm fighting a lot with my daughter, who's a teenager, but not my son. Because, girls, they always have to fight with their moms. I guarantee you I've heard that phrase. Oftentimes, these generalizations of gender or whatever identity is often a way of soothing the self. It obviously soothes mothers if they believe, it soothes mothers who conflict with their daughters. It soothes them to believe that all daughters have to fight with their mothers. Because often you will find a pattern. The client in my office, the mother, will have fought with her mother, and her mother fought with her mother. And so in their world, it looks like a natural part of gender or something. But I'll hear the opposite. I'll hear people say, boys, they're always going to fight with their mothers and bond with their fathers. You'll hear it goes every direction. So, when I hear that in my office, I just listen. Like, what's the message that they're trying to tell me? What I see is that they're potentially ashamed of having a lot of fighting with their daughter, because mothers will blame themselves, parents will blame themselves for things going wrong in their family. Unfairly often, they'll blame themselves. And so that's what I'm hearing. I'm hearing shame, and I'm hearing a justification, a way of alleviating that shame a little bit. That's what I hear, and that's what I respond to. I don't respond to the falsehood of what they're saying. I don't jump down their throat. I would not have that impulse. It doesn't matter to me that they have that point of view. Now, if they had that point of view and I felt it interfered with the goals of treatment, i.e. lowering conflict, then I might address it, but I would be a lot nicer and diplomatic about it and sort of test it out. And if the client pushed back, I would let it go, because that's not what I'm there for. Therapy is a sacred place, and it's one of the biggest responsibilities you could have in life, to care for someone else, to be on that precipice between helping them and harming them. There's a lot of potential for help and harm in the therapy office, and I take that very, very seriously. And all of that supersedes any other personal agenda that I have, like the annoyance that I get with people generalizing about gender. It's just not, or race for that matter. If someone said something racist in my, now there's different styles, and I have been known to, veer away from the treatment plan and address racism or sexism in my office when it doesn't have anything to do with the treatment plan. But often it does, really. But, sometimes I'm just like, I can't stand by and listen to that. I'm not going to just act like that's not a problem. I'm going to say something to that. Sometimes I will. But generally speaking, I have my eye on the ball. I have my eye on the focus of therapy. The conceptualization that I have developed collaboratively with them is this big shining ball, like I'm a moth to a flame kind of a thing. I can't see anything else, and or I shouldn't say that, but it's very compelling, the core of therapy. I'm not just having a conversation, and my own preferences and my own reactivities are not really even in the room. And if they are, I question them, right? It's like, why am I making this about me? So, you could argue that this whole podcast, I never thought about it this way. This whole podcast project it gives me an opportunity to do yammering that I actually suppress when I'm a therapist. I don't suppress, but it's not like I have to push it down, because I don't even have the impulse. But, as a therapist, I'm quiet. Very, very quiet as a therapist. But, I'm a talkative person, so y'all have been listening to me balance the scales for 15 years. All right, let's take a break. All right, back from the break. Let's do an OPP. These people became patrons all the way back in 2020. We have Emily from Alberta, Canada. We have Carrie from Canada as well. We have Margaret from Pennsylvania, United States. We have Annette from Queensland, Australia. We have Anelli from Estonia. We have Michelle from Poland. We have Katerina from Croatia. And the following folks did not list where they live. So we have Andrea, Kelsey, Colleen, Kelly, Kelly and Kelsey. We have Carrie, Katerina, Kelsey, and Kelly, and a Kaylee. And then we got Bumper and Lauren and Laura and Attila and Victoria and another Laura and Cam and Haley and Mike, all people from God knows where. So thank you for being a patron through thick and thin. Seriously, you are the wind beneath my wings. I almost said you're literally the wind beneath my wings, but that's not true. You're figuratively the wind beneath my wings, which is very important to me. I wouldn't be able to be yammering into the microphone right now if you weren't a patron, honestly, really, because being a patron means I get money, I can pay my bills, and I don't have to work at the university as much, or I don't have to have as big of a private practice. That's how it works, and you are this very important part of my family's life. Like really, truly. Thank you. All right, this next email is from middle tier patron Jocelyn G. She says, "Hi, Kirk. Your flaw shame that you talk about sounds like my spouse's. Like you, my spouse was considered very young for the leadership roles that he held throughout his career." So just chiming in here. Yeah, so if you heard my deep dives on obsessive compulsive personality disorder, I discovered through that deep dive that I have a mild case of it. And in a nutshell, due to flaw shame or mild criticism trauma for me, but for those who have the full-blown disorder, they have, in all likelihood, a lot of criticism trauma growing up very early in life. It results in this thing that I call flaw shame, meaning that you have shame about flaws, that it's a schema, if you will, that you have to be perfect. You're trying to overcompensate for this notion that you have imperfections that lead to rejection from people. So you try to compensate for that by becoming perfect, and you have this compulsion to be perfect all the time. And there's various different methods of being perfect. You can be perfect like with your surroundings. You can be very meticulous and clean, or you can be very perfect about your diet, or very perfect about your workout routine, or perfect about the way you dress, perfect about the way you present yourself, how you talk, your career. There's a lot of different manifestations of perfection in this realm. So you're, Jocelyn, you're saying, your flaw shame sounds like my spouse. Like you, my spouse was considered very young for the leadership roles he held throughout his career. Oh, so Jocelyn is comparing her spouse to me because, yeah, I became a professor when I was young, and that didn't necessarily help because I was in over my head often, which makes it hard to be perfect, right? So going on, he is in his mid-30s, and he is a CFO of a large company. So Kirk, do you think your flaw shame was there before your career catapulted and you were constantly the youngest person in the room? Did that make it worse? Just chiming in here. Well, it's kind of chicken or the egg, because on one hand, yeah, it didn't help. And I do this a lot. There's a lot of things in my life where I will push myself beyond what I think other people would think is rational. I will make these leaps into areas that I am clearly incompetent at, but I am gaining some competence, and I really want to be good at this, and then I get destroyed by the failure. Not destroyed. The thing is with my mild OCPD, I was raised well enough such that I know myself and value myself and have enough self-esteem. That's kind of the key with perfectionism, is that if you have enough self-esteem, then you might suffer a little bit from perfectionism, but it's kind of like pro and con. There's a con that you suffer, but the pro is that you're highly driven. You often achieve a lot in your life and get a lot of gratification from these achievements. So that's kind of me. Not to say that I don't suffer, because I do, but if I am aware enough and take care of myself enough and make good choices, then I can mitigate or eliminate the negative side of the mild OCPD perfectionism. But for me, I think I am driven to perfectionism is kind of a funny term, because on one hand, it does describe it, but on the other hand, it's just this drive to achieve, to experience. That's kind of the way I feel about it. I don't want to stagnate. So my mild OCPD both drives me to achieve and push myself, but also stresses me out, because if things aren't perfect in the way, getting back to what I was saying earlier, that it can manifest in very weird ways, you would think that as a therapist, I would suffer if a client thought I was a bad therapist, right? I would be like, oh no, I'm not a perfect therapist. That never tweaked me for some reason. When clients would complain or something, or they would terminate early, and I'd be like, I wonder why they terminated. That would never tweak me. I might be stressed about it a little bit, but what really would tweak me was being a professor. If a student thought I was a bad professor, boy, did that tweak me, and still does. There's something about being a professor that I don't know what it is. And if a student has a negative thought about me, and I talked about this with you as listeners, it's a similar kind of thing. You're not you as a listener can't tweak me as much as a student can, but you're close. Whereas if a client, I've had clients, I can't really think of one off the top of my head, but I'm sure it's happened where a client just says, well, I can remember this one couple I saw years and a couple decades ago. And I don't remember the circumstances, but I concluded that the wife hated me and just thought I was a terrible therapist. I mean, I don't know if she would characterize it that way, but I remember I had stepped in it and didn't know that I was stepping in it, and I had created a rupture, and I failed to repair that rupture. And I walked away from that, so it was, concerning enough that I still remember it to this day out of the thousands of clients I worked with back then. But it didn't, keep me up at night. I was just like, oh man, that kind of sucked. And well, you did the best you could. But if I do the best I can and a student thinks that I didn't do the right thing or that I'm a terrible, or even if there's this rating form that they fill out, 1 out of 7 or 5. If someone gives me say the top is 5, if they give me a 4, I'll dwell on that for a few days. What did I do? How do I stop that from happening in the future? Literally. And that would result in me becoming I would say a pretty student-pleasing professor. Now that didn't mean I became easy. No students considered me to be easy. I was known for not being easy, but I did strive constantly to not only avoid my distress, but also just be a good servant to the students. It's just the way I saw myself. I was in service to them. If I didn't deliver and make their money worth it, because a lot of these students, they're paying their own money, right? So it's expensive, and I wanted it to be worth it to them. Anyway, so for you as a listener, during the trial, when there were groups of people, mobs of people that were talking amongst themselves online and having a straw man about me and attacking me and believing things about me and complaining about me to the licensing board, then that did keep me up at night. If they were students, then I don't know what would have happened, but it was still in that direction. So it really does tweak me. Anyway, so what you're asking, Jocelyn, is being the youngest person in the room as a professor, did that make it worse? Did that actually start it? That's what I think you're asking, Jocelyn. Is it you're thinking that your partner didn't have perfectionism or didn't have mild OCPD, but because he's now thrust into this stressful situation as the youngest person in the room, it's causing him a lot of stress. Now, it's possible that he doesn't have mild OCPD now or before, and he's just very stressed, and you're framing it as such. Some things are just really stressful, right? And there's nothing disordered in the personality that results in that or contributes to that. There's also a possibility that, he did develop something akin to mild OCPD, but typically with OCPD or any personality disorder, you developed the foundation of it at the very least when you were very young, like 3, 4, 5, 6 years old. And it can be exacerbated or triggered or catalyzed when you are older, but you always were susceptible to it growing up, is at least the way that I conceptualize it. Or he always had mild OCPD or moderate, and he managed it well enough or hid it enough or something, and having this job is tweaking him in particular. Like for me, there were times when I quit I quit being a professor twice. Mid-career, partially because of this issue, but also just because it didn't pay very much. Being a professor doesn't pay very much, even when you're high up in the ranks. It's a pay cut. We would often talk as professors. It's like, man, if we just had a practice all week, we would earn twice as much money. But we're here because we want to help the next generation of therapists. It meets different kind of needs, Anyway, point is that I quit a couple times, and during those breaks, when I thought my career as a professor was over, when every time I quit, I'm like, it's tough. I love teaching, but there's some downsides to it. So, I think that's the end of that chapter. I had significantly less stress. I didn't have something that was tweaking me. And I remember feeling that. I wouldn't dread the upcoming lecture that I had, right? I wouldn't stare into the darkness at night. I would just go to sleep. So it's possible that for him, he has the susceptibility to perfectionism and flaw shame, but developed a lifestyle either randomly or on purpose that protected him from that trigger going on with your email. What do you think I could say or do to help my spouse feel less pressure to be perfect? Or is it an occupational hazard of being young for your role? He is in therapy and has an executive coach, but he still struggles, and I wish I could be more helpful with relieving the giant pressure valve that is his work life. End of email, Jocelyn. Jocelyn actually wrote end of email. I think that's hilarious that people do that because I say that right. So good job, Jocelyn, for that inside joke that I'm guessing no one else understands. Maybe you do. Anyway, so how do you help your spouse? Well, talk, be there, ask him. That's the best thing you can do. He's in therapy, so presumably he has an avenue to explore this with you. Just go to him and say okay, so this is general advice for everybody. When you are in a situation like this, like you see your friend or partner or family member that's stressed out and you want to help them, the first thing you should do is evaluate your own feelings, because it's possible that if you don't monitor and know your own needs and feelings, that you might push help on someone else, right? Like let's say, Jocelyn, you are scared. Often spouses will get fear in this situation because if my partner is stressed out, what if the stress breaks him or pulls him away from me, or he falls into drinking or an affair or something? Those thoughts aren't necessarily conscious or front of mind, but it's totally rational to think that way. And so if it's fear that you're feeling, fear of losing him, but you're not necessarily aware of it, then you go to him and you say, hey, how can I help? And he turns to you and he's like, it's okay. I got it. Well, because you're still afraid, you might actually get angry at him and say, you got to let me into your life. Okay, well, then you're off track. Then you're not actually talking from truth, from your emotions, and then conflict ensues. A lot of divorces begin this way. So the first thing you need to do is investigate your feelings. It's possible that you don't have tremendous fear or pain and you just want to help. You just have altruism. That's possible. But it's likely there's some emotion in there. Okay, so once you get that down, then you go to him and you say, and this is true, again, this applies to a lot of contexts. You go to him and you say, so I've been noticing from my perspective that you seem stressed out from work because you're the youngest person in the room and you're trying to live up to everyone's expectations of you, which is fine, and it's your career. Am I right about that you're kind of stressed out about it? And he's like, yeah, I'm stressed out. Okay. Well, let me tell you how it makes me feel. I care about how you feel. That's kind of the baseline of this. But I want to share with you how it affects me. I get scared of losing you, or I get scared that you're going to have a heart attack and I'll lose you, or you'll suffer. And I don't want that for you or for me or for us. And I know that's not necessarily rational, but that's kind of where I go when I see you suffering in this way. So I just want you to know that. You don't have to change your career for my feelings, but I just want to get it off my chest. If there's anything you can do to reassure me, or maybe there's something you could do more in therapy to help you with your flaw shame, or I don't know, it just begins a conversation, right? And if you start from there, it's not a debatable thing that you have those feelings, right? And it gives him a chance to actually address those feelings. Because if you come at him with emotionality, but you don't tell him, it's crazy making. Because if you've ever been the recipient of that, and I'm guessing we all have thousands of times, because people almost never speak directly or know what to speak directly around, that someone's coming at you like, hey, let me help you with this. And you're like, no, I got it. And then they get upset with you. And you're like, why are you upset with me? You offered help to me and I'm telling you I don't need your help. Now you're angry at me. I'm like obligated to allow you to help me in a way that actually makes it worse for me. Like, what's going on here? It's crazy making. You're just thinking, what is going on? How come you're angry? Why am I a bad person because I got this on my own? So you don't want to do that to them if that's the case. Yeah. The other thing, if that's not the case, is just go, hey, I worry about you. I just wanted to tell you that. A lot of good can happen if you avoid trying to help someone, trying to fix their problem, and instead just tell them, hey, you know what? I see you stressed out, and I'm not thinking about wanting you to quit your job or anything. I'm just telling you that I care about you, I love you, and I'm worried about you. That does a lot of things. One is it keeps it simple, and there's no debate there, and it's loving to say that. The other thing is to the individual, it might help them because they're like, oh, yeah, maybe I do need to contemplate what's going on here. If my stress is stressing her out, then, what's happening for me? Is my work-life balance a little askew? Whereas if you go for the control, I'm going to fix you, let me fix it, let me tell you how to think, or let me tell you what to do in therapy, you might get pushback and defensiveness, and that doesn't help, right? And it begins a pattern. So, Jocelyn, end of response. All right, this next email is from highest tier patron Cine from Seattle. She says, Dear Dr. Honda, I discovered you through your YouTube analysis of the ultimatum queer love. As a lesbian woman, it feels like I've met someone similar to every one of the cast members, and my past dating trauma healed through your compassionate and insightful analysis of them. I also just finished listening to your attachment deep dive and perfectionism deep dives, and I feel truly inspired. I am a physician who recently finished my decade-long training. I went into the field knowing that it tries to recruit, the medical field tries to recruit the most compassionate people, but then the medical field chews all of the compassion out of them. I thought I could go through it helping other trainees, but I find myself at the finish line damaged and less compassionate myself. I struggle to empathize at work, and I do try to help the underserved population, but many won't cooperate with us, and sometimes they hurt our staff emotionally or physically. I have reached out to my colleagues asking how they retain compassion, only to get an overwhelming response that I just shouldn't care. So just chiming in here. Yeah, well, so it sounds like, Cine, you entered the field with altruism and compassion as a major component of your reason, the purpose of your life maybe, or at least of your career. And as you start to work in the field, it gets hard, maybe because of the way your colleagues talk about the patients, or being overworked, or the clientele, the patients. And what I'll say to that is that's a result of burnout. If you at your core have compassion, because not everyone is made to do that kind of work, right? But it sounds like you are, and you do have that innate altruism, and something snuffed it out, or something is eclipsing it. And that's what we call burnout. And the way people talk about burnout, sometimes they can be very simplistic about it, right? Like, just do self-care. But it's really way more complicated and fundamental than I think it's often talked about. But in general, often when people are starting out in their career, unfairly, those people who are, yourself, for example, who are in debt the most from school loans, who are trying to make ends meet, you're not earning a lot of money outside of graduate school, and so you're trying to pay your bills. And those individuals, both in the medical field and in therapy in general, get some of the most stressful jobs. It should really be the opposite. For us therapists who have been in the field a long time and our bills are more regular and we have our life under control, we should be the ones who should be burdened with the difficult clients. But it's lopsided, it's reverse, it's opposite world. So the irony of these kinds of jobs is that in the beginning, you can burn out and then quit, or become demoralized and give up, at least in your heart. And then for the rest of your career, when it might be getting better or it could get better, you don't recognize it or don't care because you gave up a long time ago or something. So that's what I'll say. I don't know your situation, but it sounds like if you're working with underserved populations, these individuals have a lot of stresses in their life, right? They also have been mistreated by authority and maybe by the medical field. And so there's a lot of barriers, right? There's a lot of strife. They have a bone to pick maybe, or a lot of traumas that get triggered. And it can cause some of these individuals to become combative in treatment or something. And this can make it stressful for you. And the temptation is to draw a conclusion, it sounds like many of your colleagues have, that it's us against them. And you have to stop caring. You have to snuff out that inner flame that is altruism and compassion and wanting to give. You just have to go to work and endure it and earn your money and go home. And that is unfortunate. There are systemic solutions to that, like lightening your caseload, giving you more support, having more resources, raising tax dollars so that there's a greater, robust wraparound service. Because I'm guessing that with some of these underserved patients, within the underserved population, as you put it, they really need several professionals in their life, including you. But because they don't have those people, because our politicians and our voters refuse to allocate those funds, then you now not only have to provide medical care, but you have to provide a lot of different other kinds of services that you aren't trained to do or don't have time to do. That's just a guess. So going on with your email. After listening to your attachment deep dive, I was teary my entire shift at work that day, interacting with the same population. I can now see the little hurt child inside of them. Oh, that's good. I also realized the attachment injuries I endured during my medical training, losing my connection to my wife due to inhumane work schedules. Yeah, I only know this by talking to medical professionals, but not everyone, and certainly there are different experiences, but there's this, it's almost like hazing. Maybe it is literal hazing, I don't know, but there's this inhumane work schedule that is imposed on novice medical professionals that doesn't serve anyone other than, I think, to weed people out, I guess, which I think has been demonstrated not to be an effective way of actually raising the effectiveness of your field, because basically the only people who hold on are maybe privileged people or people who hate themselves and don't have a work-life balance or something. I don't know. But also, I think an underlying culture of, well, I had to go through it, so do you. And if you can't take it, if you can't handle the heat, get out of the kitchen, sort of thing. And that's just stupid. There's no science to that. It's basically just like, well, I got screwed and I hate to see younger people not get screwed in the way I was screwed. Also, patients suffer. I don't know all the data, but my limited understanding is that when you make physicians work 12-hour shifts or 20-hour shifts or something, mistakes actually increase and people suffer because of that, right? It's not common, but it does happen. So it's unfair and weird. It doesn't make any sense. So going on with your email. So, I endured a lot of attachment injuries due to my medical training. I lost a connection to my wife due to inhumane work scheduling. Losing access to my friends via relocation needing for training. Yeah, chiming here. That's another aspect of these kinds of professions. It's true also in psychology that when you're being trained as a psychologist, in order to get a viable internship, you usually have to move, to another state. And I just find that to be really just unfair. And it basically was developed during a time when people went to their bachelor's degree and then immediately went into their graduate school. So they might be 27 or 25 when they're looking for their internship. And so typically that age group, you're not as locked in, right? You certainly could be locked in. But in my university, a lot of the students, I don't know the average age, but anecdotally, they're all in their 30s and 40s, sometimes 50s, 60s. Sometimes there are students in their 20s, but not usually. And for these people, they might be married with kids. Their kids are in school. They're integrated in their society and in their community. They have responsibilities. And because they want to become a psychologist, they're required to move to another state and just completely upend everything. I mean, what are the kids supposed to do? Is the spouse supposed to suddenly get a job in another city? And sometimes they'll do that, but obviously that's disruptive, right? It doesn't make any sense. You don't have to do that to get a good training, but it's within the culture, and maybe things are changing within APA accredited programs, but somehow I doubt it, because it's like, well, the only people who would complain about this would be current students, and everyone understands that current students have no power. It's all in the accreditors and the professors of the programs and the seasoned people and the lobbyists and the people who work for the professional organizations, and they went through that, and they're way beyond that. So it just screws people over. And of course, in the medical profession, that's also true, right? In order to get your residency or whatever you call it, your training, on-the-job training when you're in your program, or even just your first job out of graduate school, it's almost a given that you will have to move. And I just find that to be not great. I mean, there's got to be a solution to that, right? Now, maybe, look, if you're in a very specialized sort of job, like you work with a very special sort of cancer, and there's only 15 different centers around the country that service those kinds of clients, their patients, then maybe, you have to move. But I don't know. It completely ruins people's lives, and is geared towards workaholics who, don't have work-life balance. So anyway, losing my connection to my wife, going on with your email, due to inhumane work schedule, losing access to my friends via relocation needed for training, unable to make deep connections with my peers because I was too busy. It's difficult to feel compassion for others when you are stripped of your own important attachments. Yeah, just chiming in here. That's another major factor in burnout, which is that our needs in our private life are not being met. When you can't get when you can't fill the tank at home by having secure attachments, by being able to vent, that kind of thing, then you go to work and you're already at a deficit. You're already on empty, and you're expected to give more. It's just impossible going on. I feel inspired to advocate for changes in our medical training so we can be better doctors for patients and ourselves. Just chiming in here. Yeah, well, good. I'm glad, but I wouldn't hold your breath that things are going to change, because a lot of people have been trying to change it, and maybe it has changed, and maybe it will, but good luck and advocate for that going on here. Thank you again for your important work. With love and respect, Cine. P.S. You said that it was okay for us to attach to you. I do feel very attached to you and your podcast, so it was reassuring, and I felt safe to have your permission to attach to you. End of email. Yeah, I want to, I don't know if everyone talks about it. I feel like the internet, YouTube, podcast sphere is waking up to parasocial relationships, as they'll often be called. But often that term, I don't know, there's different associations with it. Certainly in our society, when you say parasocial relationships, they think of a creep who is over-investing in a YouTuber or an influencer or something. And certainly that is a subtype. But I have parasocial relationships with the podcasts that I listen to and the YouTube channels that I watch, some a lot more than others. And that is healthy for me. There's nothing wrong with that. I feel comforted by certain content providers when I listen to them or watch them every day or nearly every day. I want to know their take on things. It feels good to have that, that stability, or, I don't necessarily agree with them, but it feels good to just have that in your life. I don't know, a connection, a through line in your life, and people will do that with me. Also, the kinds of things that we talk about, me and my co-hosts, are so vulnerable at times, it would be weird if you didn't feel connected to us at times. So other podcasts, like I'll listen to This American Life, for example, or Heavyweight, and I will connect with the people on those podcasts deeply. But those podcasts have often different subjects every episode. So, and that's, what they do, and it's great. But with this podcast, I've been doing this for 15 years. Me and Berto have been doing this for 15 years. Bob and Rebecca have been doing it for a number of years as well. And if we've been with you day in and day out, and you've been with us, we could call that absolutely an attachment. What's wrong with it? Society will shame it. Your friends might stigmatize it, but I challenge anyone who has a stigma around it to give me a scientific reason as to why it's wrong. It's new, or they have a heuristic that if you like a celebrity too much, then that means you're a psycho and you're going to kill someone. Why do people watch way too many movies? I think that's a big problem with our society. Is like people watch way too many TV shows and movies and regard that as a representation of reality, and when the vast majority of people who become very attached to their parasocial relationships, their celebrities that they follow, don't do anything bad. They just are really into it. Now, are there risks? Yeah, there are risks, like for the individual who has the parasocial relationship, they might develop a fantasy that, not that they're going to kill the famous person, but that they are actually in a relationship, right? Some of you, I'm guessing not, but it's possible that you actually, because of your unmet needs, you start to believe that we are in a relationship, and you might start to expect me to reciprocate, right? Because that would make sense if we were friends or something. And let's say you email in and I don't respond to the email, or it takes me a long time, or I don't respond in a way that you were hoping, and you're putting all your eggs in that basket. That could be very devastating, and that would not be something that I would recommend, and you would obviously want to protect yourself from that. I've never heard anyone who had that reaction, but there are risks, yeah. But if it's, as they used to say in the commercials, as a part of a well-rounded breakfast, if you have your relationship with me as a part of a well-rounded set of attachments, then I'm guessing everything works out just fine. But anyway, for you, Sine, I love your email. It sounds like you're finding a path, or you have some optimism about how to find your way back to compassion. You found that by the attachment deep dive, and the magic of attachment theory, or even more broadly, just what I believe to be understanding the human condition. When you see people that are annoying you or hurting you or scaring you, in all likelihood, if you truly understand where it came from, it would not be as scary or hurtful, because you see the defense and you see the hurt child inside, as you were saying. And for you to be able to see that and have compassion for that, it's not only a gift that you're giving to your patients, but it's a gift you're giving to yourself as you're noticing. You're no longer, in that day when you were in that perspective, you're no longer stressed out and us versus them. You're connecting with, you feel you're in your purpose of having altruism, maybe in the midst of a client being, difficult in some way to you, but you see behind that. And that to me is, people will say in my reaction videos, they'll comment, they'll say, "Oh, you're so wholesome, Kirk." And that's fine if people call me that, but I don't see it that way, because I identify with a lot of things. I do not identify as being wholesome. If you ask my friends, they would not, no one's ever called me wholesome. So what I do see myself as is seeing people accurately. When I understand how humans operate for the most part, or I have what I believe to be a workable model of how humans operate, then I have a way of interpreting why people do what they do, or at least a starting point to start hypothesizing and investigating. And when I see people accurately, like to break it down in a specific situation, I have a client not now, this is just hypothetically, let's say I have a client who comes in my office and she sits down on my couch and it's session 15 and she says, I almost didn't come in today because I don't feel like you're a good therapist. And I say, oh, so I ask what happened. And she tells me that in our last session, I really hurt her feelings and made her angry because let's just say that she's upset because I ended the session directly on time. Let's say the previous couple sessions, I had ended the session a couple minutes after the ending point. And then last week I ended it, on the dot, on the minute. And maybe I was a little abrupt or something for some reason, or I came across that way. And my client was very hurt by that because of abandonment traumas, and sits on my couch and says, I almost didn't come in today. I almost terminated with you because I think you're a bad therapist. And so if I just looked at the surface information here, then the client is being ridiculous, completely unfair. Wait, so you think I'm a bad therapist because I ended it on time? What? Okay. But if you see people accurately, then you actually do not react that way, right? You react in a way that's more accurate. So when I see that, I don't need someone to tell me this because I've been through it so many times, and it doesn't take a genius to hypothesize, maybe this person has abandonment trauma or has some trauma around being rejected, or maybe even a therapist who dumped them somehow or something. Some hurt, some pain that hurt when I ended it on time. And then the client ran away with it and became more hurt and then angry and then rejecting of me to protect herself. And when I say stuff like that to the reality TV show folks, the viewers on YouTube will say I'm wholesome. And I'll say, that's not how I see it. I see it as I'm being accurate, because I don't want people to think, because not everyone out there in the world identifies as being wholesome, right? I think they think of me as like a Mr. Rogers character or something, which is one of the best, compliments I could ever get. But of the compliments that I get, I cannot, I don't understand it. You know what I mean? When people say that I have compassion, I take that on. Thank you. I try to be compassionate. But when people say I'm like Mr. Rogers or wholesome, I'm like, I don't know. Thanks, but I don't know if you understand what I'm actually doing, Again, if people call me wholesome, I never, what do you say? I'm terrible with idioms. What's the horse in the horse's mouth? Anyway, shake a stick in the horse's mouth. That's not it. I'm terrible with idioms. I blame my parents. They were not great. I'm not great. I grew up in a non-idiom home. Anyway, so I want people to see it as I'm seeing people accurately, so that if they can actually, because anyone can see people accurately. Everyone wants to see people accurately, right? So, because if they identify, because another thing I think that people think is, like, when they say I'm wholesome, I think they think that, with Mr. Rogers, for example, I think he was committed to being wholesome. I think that if he were left to his own devices, he would just be more of a regular human being, right? He would be more black and white, more gray. He would be more nuanced and maybe angry at times or upset or whatever. But he's wholesome because I think he set out to create a persona that was very safe for children, and he succeeded. Was very successful in that to me as a child. So I don't want people to see me that way, at least primarily. I want to provide a model for seeing people such that everyone can have the opportunity to, quote unquote, see people accurately. I say accurately because that's biased for my way of seeing things, but it often is confirmed, right? I will go to people and I'll say, so what was going on there? Like with the client, I have this opportunity. That's what's so glorious about therapy, is I can actually talk with her and say, okay, well, wow, I'm really sorry. So I start there. I'm sorry that I did that. And in my head, I'm like, I didn't do anything wrong, but that's not what is going to help right now. And I say, it sounds like it really hurt you or made you angry. What happened? And she'll say, well, yeah, it pissed me off because, I'm paying for therapy and you said that you would always be there for me, and that's not being there for me. And I say, wow, okay, so I get it. I'm sorry. Thanks for telling me and giving me the opportunity to apologize. I am dedicated to being a good therapist for you, and I do not want to make you feel that way. And I made a mistake, and I'm sorry. And I hope that you can forgive me for that. I'll try to do better. Now, in my head, I'm not going to go over in my sessions, but for now, I want to give the message that I carry, because that's the primary thing, right? People from the outside might say, oh, look how wholesome or how nice he is. That's not that's not my mission. My mission is to be effective as an agent of change, as an agent of healing. And in order to do that, I have to forgo my own ego or soothe my own ego on the inside, or even get ego gratification from being able to see people accurately in my own model and help them and see their mood change right there before my eyes, from pissed off and angry at me and thinking about suing me to feeling safe and crying and saying, thank you for apologizing. No one's ever done that before. I get a lot of ego gratification from that. It feels good to be useful and to be helpful and to be effective as a therapist that I dedicated myself to so long ago. So that's why am I talking about that? Oh, well, so you, Sine, are starting to do that. You're starting to see people accurately. And I know a lot of other people will email in about the same thing, whether you're in a profession that involves that or not. Teachers will tell me, because of the theories that I will talk about, people will say, wow, it really helps me with my students. Or people will be a hairdresser and they'll say, wow, it really helps me with my clients, or a police officer, or, just all sorts of jobs. Or if it helps you to understand your partner or your past partner, you also were saying this as well, Sine, that when I tried to hypothesize about the various reality TV show cast members on Ultimatum Queer Love, for you're like, oh, maybe that's what was going on with my ex, because you say that you knew someone very similar, and you also dated people that were similar to the cast members. And it does heal, because if we go by society and their notions of why people break up with us or cheat on us or hurt us, or we go with our knee-jerk reaction, then they're all psychopathic, narcissistic, malignant, love-bombing people. And, I guess sometimes that can be a comforting point of view, but not usually. It can be comforting in the beginning, and when someone first hurts you, it can be comforting to really go for it in the anger department in your mind. But in the end, usually it helps to see people accurately and see, well, they have an inner child as well, and they got defensive because of this, and maybe I played a part in it, kind of, not entirely, but maybe I played a part in it, and I can learn from myself. That's usually way more comforting, at least to me and a lot of other people, and it sounds like to you as well, Sine. So I just really appreciate your email. And, for all you people out there that are holding on to your sanity as you're trying to help others in your job or in your life, maybe it's a family member or someone at work or clientele, patients, let me tell you, you are awesome. There's so many things that you could have done with your career, but you chose to serve other people. You chose to give back. You chose the altruistic route. You could have chose a profession that had lower stress and a lot more money and a lot less education and a lot less loans, right? But you chose to make a difference in the world, and you deserve a big ass pat on the back from me and everyone else. And sometimes these jobs have maybe a parent out there who is taking care of a difficult kid without much help from the outside. You deserve a big ass pat on the back. And there's not a lot of thanks. There's not a lot of rewards. There's not an Oscar ceremony for the single parent that is, bending over backwards, working 40 hours a week, and then coming home and taking care of the kids and swallowing their pride and putting aside their selves so that they can take care of everything. There's not an Oscar ceremony for that. There should be. There's not a red carpet. You won't be featured on the cover of People magazine, but you should. And let me tell you that. Let me fill up that tank a little bit so that you can keep going. You can keep helping. Also, fill your own tank, give it to yourself and give yourself a big ass pat on the back and tell yourself, reward, I feel like I did that when I was in my early career. I'm just like, I feel good about the fact that I'm trying to help. And I don't always feel successful. Especially in the beginning, I felt really just confused and scared of what I was doing. But I did know that I could have done a lot of other things. In the mid-90s, everyone was going in to work at the .coms, right? At your Microsofts and your Real Networks and your Googles and all that stuff. It was a lot of, in Seattle in particular, Seattle is just everywhere. I had friends that were becoming millionaires overnight because of stock options, and here I am just struggling and working 70 hours a week and barely paying my bills, and working at a job where I would talk with people, family and friends about what I did, and they'd be like, so why, so you talk to crazy people? Or they say, well, therapists aren't all therapists crazy? Just these really demeaning, lack of understanding kinds of reactions to, I didn't need them to pat me on the back necessarily, but, just working in isolation, maybe within stigma, and, every day just trying to serve, trying to help, trying to be helpful, trying to be a positive difference in the world. People who work on environmental change, similar thing. People who work in politics for the good side, for humanity. It can be a thankless task, but allow me to thank you truly, and thank yourself, and maybe cultivate groups, relationships where that happens more, right? Maybe even with other colleagues that understand they can thank you. Make sure you have mentors that thank you, that appreciate you and guide you. Having a mentor in your corner who is the wind beneath your wings, it can go a long way. You deserve that. And if you're a mentor, if you are a professor, if you're a senior professional and you have novice professionals under you or side by side with you, understand that your appreciation, your big ass pat on their back can, keep them going another day or another week. So make sure you recognize that need. And I often would really feel bad because I would forget that my students or my interns or my supervisees needed that, because they didn't usually ask me for that. But when I would give it, they would say, oh, thanks for saying that. And I'd be like, oh, I bet you a lot of others are feeling the same way. And I just failed to intuit that and give it. So make sure that you give that and receive it, because you deserve it. All right, let's take a break. All right, we're back from the break. So these people became patrons all the way back in 2020 and have stayed patrons through thick and thin. We got all these people didn't list their where they live, what town they live in. So we have Jordan, Jenny Rose, Nathan, Aaron, Gigi, Erica, Marin, Sarah, Lauren, Rosie, Inez, Jeff, Kieran, Anna, Ikram, and Katie from God knows where. Thank you so much for being a patron through thick and thin. Hopefully you are still a patron. Because when I develop this list, sometimes it's like months in the past. And so maybe none of you are patrons anymore. Hopefully you are. I'm guessing you are. Yeah, sure. Let's just say that you are. Oh, this next thing that I wanted to do is when ChatGPT became a thing a few months ago, I was playing around with it, and suddenly it occurred to me, it'd be like, wait, does ChatGPT know who I am? And it just seemed like such a weird thing. Of course, if you're listening to this in a year or 10 years, you're going to look back and think it's so quaint that we were having giggles with an AI online, because it'll just be a part of your life. But understand that in 2023, it really just became this very strange service that you could get on the and a lot of unknowns. You know what I mean? I'm trying to think about like other moments like this. Like I remember when Microsoft Paint came out in the early 90s or late 80s or something. It's probably early 90s. And you could actually draw on your computer. And I just remember thinking like, you'd use the mouse. And, and I remember really geeking out on it for a couple of weeks. And I would, if someone had a birthday, like I think my dad had a birthday coming up, and I drew him a card and I printed it out. And I think I have it. It's really dumb. It's just like I drew like a face with a hand and a joke in there or something, So I'm sure in the future it'll seem all goofy. But what I did was I asked it to write a summary of me, which is very narcissistic. But if you don't do that, then I don't know. I don't understand you. So I asked it to write it, and so here it is. So I thought I would read it and evaluate it, because some of it I think is interesting, some of it's accurate, and some of it is not. So Dr. Kirk is a licensed therapist, a professor of counseling, who is best known for his work on the Psychology in Seattle YouTube channel. So technically, in my profession, we would call ourselves therapists. Counselors are mental health counselors or licensed professional counselors. I'm a marriage and family therapist, so typically you would call me a therapist. But there's different terms, and I'm not technically not a counselor. But anyway, going on. Born and raised in the Seattle area, true. Dr. Honda completed his undergraduate studies at the University of Washington, true, before earning his master's degree in counseling psychology, not true, from Antioch University. Technically, my master's degree is in psychology with a focus or concentration on couple and family therapy, because back then the master's degree system was different than it was over time. The same degree, the same program today offers a degree in marriage and family therapy. It's complicated, but technically my master's is in psychology. And then it says, and his PhD in counseling, education, and supervision from Oregon State University. I don't know where it gets that. No, I don't have a PhD. I have a PsyD, and it's not in counseling, education, and supervision, and it's not from Oregon State University. My psychology doctorate is from Antioch University, Seattle. So let's see. Going on here. Throughout his career, Dr. Honda has worked, backing up, makes people wonder where it got that from, because it is interesting. I have colleagues, because there was a time when counselors, so this is boring, but if you're a counselor and you want to get a doctorate, you've got a master's in mental health counseling and you now want to get a doctorate, typically those folks will get a doctorate in counseling, education, and supervision. It's, the KCREP often accredited programs. And from my understanding, a number of years ago, like 10 years ago, the closest program like that was at Oregon State University, which, is about a 6-hour drive from Seattle or something. And, but now Antioch has its own PhD in counseling, education, and supervision. So I would have colleagues who were getting their doctorate at Oregon State, So is it that? Like somehow the AI found this association based on Antioch? Because if you look at the various different bios on Antioch's website, I'm guessing someone has that degree. Anyway, throughout his career, Dr. Honda has worked with a wide range of clients, including individuals, couples, and families. True. He has also provided counseling services to veterans and other groups dealing with trauma and PTSD. I don't know where he gets that from. I certainly have treated veterans, but that would not be the second sentence in my practice. Makes it sound like I specialize in veterans, which I do not. But I've treated hundreds of veterans. Seattle, south of Seattle, is a major military base, Fort Lewis and McChord Air Base, and there's also a lot of naval folks, Bainbridge Island, that kind of thing. And so there's just a lot of military folks in the area going on. But I do deal with a lot of trauma and PTSD. In addition to his work as a therapist, Dr. Honda is also an experienced educator, having taught at several universities. Not true. I've literally, let's see. It's funny. You get to a certain age and you're like, because I was about to say I've only taught at one university, Antioch University, Seattle. But I'm so old now, I'm like, well, is it possible that I taught like one or two classes somewhere else and I'm just not recalling right now? It's weird. There was a time in my life when there was no way that I would just have a question mark about answering that question for myself. But I'm 98% sure that I've never taught anywhere else, at least in any kind of capacity along these lines. But anyway, so Dr. Honda is also an experienced educator, having taught at several universities throughout the Pacific Northwest. No. Also says I taught at community colleges, which I'm also 99% sure that hasn't happened. That's why you have resumes, so I can look at it and make sure that I'm right about that. Dr. Honda is perhaps, can I just say something totally off topic? I took a break. I went upstairs talking with my wife, and I told her that so I do so many things with this podcast now, and the YouTube channel. There are so many different things that I do, types of things that I do, making a video or interviewing someone or a co-host or live stream or social media. And it is interesting because as I'm doing this right now, what I'm doing right now, talking into this microphone to y'all, it feels so comfortable to me. I feel so happy and in the zone. For those of you, some people worry like, oh, his YouTube channel is taking off, like the podcast is going to end. No. If anything ends, it'll be everything else. This is so up my alley. I don't know what it is about this task of looking at my notes or reading emails or blabbing or doing a deep dive and, by myself. It just feels so satisfying professionally. It's simple, but I get the chance to really explore everything. If I stumble, I can stop recording and go back and re-record it, which happens occasionally. I can take a break. I don't have to, my hair doesn't have to look okay. I don't have to have the lights up. I don't have to have the camera on. I can sit however I want to. I can wear whatever I want to. And so, and just the intimacy as well, like speaking directly to you. It's a smaller audience that listens to the audio podcast, which feels much more up my alley. And so I just want to say that. And thank you for giving me this opportunity. It really is a dream come true as a professional. I started the podcast 15 years ago, and over time, this vision started to coalesce in my mind of what I'm doing right now for a living. This was at a time when podcasts were not monetized, and I just imagined I could, even though it didn't exist in the field of podcasting yet, I'm like, I can see it though. I can taste it. I can visualize it. I guess there were sponsors back then, but it was only for the big podcasts like the Adam Carollas and the This American Life. For little podcasts like myself, one, who do I contact? And two, even if I did get a hold of them, they wouldn't want to sponsor my podcast. So, but I always wanted this. This was the dream, and I'm living the dream. It really is that. It's because of you, because you trust me or give me your time or participate with me. You email in. It's just magical, to the point where if this hadn't happened, if you and I hadn't built this together, then this ChatGPT AI wouldn't even know who I was. So it's all cyclical. All right. Dr. Kirk, Dr. Hanna is perhaps well known for his work on the Psychology in Seattle YouTube channel, which he launched in 2008. I would say podcast and YouTube channel, but yeah, I guess the channel does reach a lot more people. I was looking at some stat today that I hadn't seen before. YouTube has like incredible analytics, by the way. You can see so many different things. Like one of the things that I can see is what other channels are people watching that watch my channel. And it's really weird. Some of the other channels, I'm like, why is everyone watching me and that channel? Like, I don't know. But one of the analytics is unique viewers, right? Like how many individual people have viewed your stuff in the past X amount of days. And I think it was something like in the past 3 months, 1 million people, I'm pretty sure that's right, 1 million people, individuals, unique individuals, clicked on one of my videos. Now, who knows how accurate that is, but it's Google, so they're probably pretty accurate. Now, a good number of those people will click on my video for 5 seconds and go, this is what I want, and they never come back. So, I don't know, but let's say it's 500,000. 500,000 people sat through at least half of one of my videos. I mean, wow. I'll tell you, the podcast audience, a lot smaller, which, feels intimate and better for me between you and me. Anyway, going on. The channel features a wide range of content related to psychology, mental health, relationships, and personal growth. So the first three things, psychology, mental health, relationships, yes. But personal growth, that phrase is, I don't know. That's not how I would describe it. But you could argue it absolutely is that. But that implies I'm somehow providing like direct advice or I don't know. Who knows? Dr. Hanna's videos cover a wide range of topics, including personality disorders, attachment styles, and trauma. Wow. Boom. ChatGPT, you really nailed it. Personality disorders, attachment styles. Now, they could be getting this from literally my bio on my website, so I shouldn't be congratulating them that much. He also provides helpful advice and insights for viewers struggling with their mental health or looking to improve their relationships. Yeah, again, major caveat that I don't provide treatment over the internet, but yeah, you could argue that's true. And that's a pretty good, so that let me just honor ChatGPT. Now, maybe it just pulled it from my bio, but I don't think so, because I wouldn't say this about myself. He provides helpful advice. I would never say that about me. So it's a pretty good, concise paragraph. One of the things that sets Dr. Hanna apart from other therapists and educators in the field of psychology is his ability to make complex ideas and theories accessible and easy to understand. Yeah, well, I would never say that about myself, but that's really nice that ChatGPT said that about me. But the thing that I think is happening here is that ChatGPT isn't saying that, right? The AI is actually just looking at the consensus online, essentially. I mean, not really. I mean, it's this whole algorithm of what's more likely to be the word that should follow the previous word, blah, blah, blah. But you could argue on a Gestalt level that the AI bot, depending on the topic and the training that has been done by reviewers that are paid to review the content on the AI, that what the AI is showing us is what the general consensus is online, right? Like maybe a lot of people have reviewed the podcast or the YouTube channel or something and said something along these lines. And so that's where it comes from, which I just have to say, that's just a huge compliment if that's even remotely true. the ability to make complex ideas and theories accessible and easy to understand. Yeah, I strive for that. That's one of my prime directives as a professor, and then that translated into being a podcaster, right? That because as a student myself, or as a learner, ongoing learner myself, I always was frustrated that books and lectures were so arcane and difficult to comprehend. And I just thought, is it that I'm too dumb, or is it that the concept is too complicated, or are these people just really bad at explaining it? And it turns out that 9 times out of 10, it's the last option. When you describe Freudian theory, for example, you can find people that will explain it in a way that you will never understand. But there's a way of I've heard experts on Freud describe Freud in a way that is very easy to understand. In fact, if Freud were here with us today, he would probably try to explain it in a way that was understandable. When you actually read his lectures, they're translated, right, often. But when you read his lectures, they're pretty simple. They're not super weird and complicated. There's some language in there, but it's not hard to understand. But you hear people talk about Freud, and you're just like, huh? At least for me. Also, object relations, I would hear people. I knew I loved object relations when I first started out, but then I would read books about object relations, and I'd be like, what? And I just find that to be annoying, and I set out to not be that way. I mean, part of it was I wanted to understand it. And so to understand it, I had to find sources that were better explaining it, or I just had to develop and sort of sift through all the confusion to figure out what was happening, sometimes going back to the original source, like reading Freud or reading John Bowlby, that kind of thing. And once I kind of get it inside of my head, I have this compulsion to organize it in a way that's simple. Like you'll hear me, I think we all do this, right? I don't think there's anything special about me, but you'll hear me say that there are 2 pillars to therapy and change. One is self-awareness, and the other is corrective experiences. And that coalesced rather recently after being an educator and therapist for almost 3 decades now. And I've always been seeking that reduction, that what is at the core. And for many years, I had several cores. If you would have asked me, like, what's the core of therapy? What's the core of change? How do you organize all the different theories into one cohesive sentence? I would probably, I'm pretty sure I would have rattled off like 8 different paragraphs and different areas that I would say relate to each other, instead of just saying this one thing, that there are 2 pillars to change in therapy. One is self-awareness and the other one is corrective experiences. Everything fits in that for me. Cognitive behavioral therapy, exposure therapy, psychoanalytic, ACT, emotionally focused attachment therapy, everything fits within that model in my head. Maybe not for other people, but it certainly does for me. Narrative therapy, collaborative therapy. Well, maybe collaborative therapy wouldn't exactly fit. I won't get into it right now, but meaning solution focused, that kind of thing. But when I would finally figure it out for myself, or I finally grasped it, I guess another part of it was, as a teacher, I need to understand it before I can teach it, right? And so I really would strive to get it. And once I got it, then I would try to, because as a teacher, you have to think on your feet. You can't have a jumble of 5 books in your head as you're trying to lecture. You have to have like the 3 bullet points so that you can branch away from that as a lecturer and as a leader, right? And so I would strive to do that. It took me a while, but once I did with different topics, like that therapy premise that I have, also with systems theory and other kinds of things, then I could teach it, but I would always return to that set of 3 bullet points. And then when I would teach, I would start from there. Because, another thing that would annoy me about professors that I didn't realize until, and I'm not even sure if this is true, but but I think this is at least a possible factor in things. I would be confused about a teacher, but as a student, I didn't know if it was the teacher or me. I usually would just blame myself, right? But often, looking back, I think what was happening was these professors were, they're speaking to people. Like when I took systems theory for the first time, I didn't even know what that was. I'd never heard of systems theory. And even if I had, I'm sure I didn't understand it. Well, the professor, he had known systems theory and learned it a long time ago, and he's known it for a long time, and he's probably bored with the basics. But I need the basics as a student to begin to even try to understand what's happening. And so a lot of professors, a lot of lecturers, a lot of leaders, supervisors, they want to talk about what they're interested in, which is things that are way beyond our abilities, right? And that would annoy me. And so I vowed I would never do that. So I would start from the beginning. We can branch out from there, but we have to return to the basics so that those people who need to catch up can. And it's just good. It's a good practice, even if you're an advanced person who understands things. It's a good thing, even for myself, to return to the basics, to ground myself in the ideas. Anyway, so thank you, ChatGPT, for saying that. Going on. He is skilled at breaking down complex psychological concepts and theories into simple, straightforward language that anyone can understand. I don't know if I'd go that far, but I try to. This makes his videos highly engaging and useful for a wide range of viewers, from students and professionals in the field of psychology to people who are simply interested in learning more about mental health and relationships. Yeah, that's a great summary right there. That's always what I tried to do. Going on. Another unique aspect of Dr. Honda's work is his emphasis on empathy and understanding. Oh, that's nice. He believes that it is important for therapists and educators to be empathetic and compassionate towards their clients and students, and he works hard to model this in his own work. Wow, yeah. Thank you. This approach has resonated with many viewers who appreciate the compassionate and non-judgmental tone of Dr. Honda's videos. Wow, where does it get that from? Does it get it from like the comments on YouTube or something? That's interesting. Going on. In addition to his work on the Psychology in Seattle YouTube channel, Dr. Honda is also the host of the Psychology in Seattle podcast. Oh, it's interesting. That kind of delineates those. The podcast features in-depth discussions with experts in the, I mean, certainly I have talked with experts, but that is an oversimplification. In the field of psychology and mental health, as well as interviews with clients. No, I've never interviewed a client on the podcast. And other individuals who have struggled with mental health issues. I mean, I guess I've interviewed people who were clients of other therapists, but I've never interviewed. Oof, that's awful. I mean, it's one thing to be inaccurate, like I went to Oregon State. It's another thing to accuse me of an ethical violation in this respect. And the last sentence, the podcast has been praised for its thoughtful and insightful approach to complex topics, as well as for its engaging and entertaining format. Oh, well, yeah, that's pretty good. At least I'd like to, that's what I always tried to achieve. In fact, one of the for a long time on our website or on the podcast main page, the description was that we would try to educate about psychology, but also be entertaining. That was another thing. So that reduction, right? What's the mission statement? And for many years, that was the mission statement was, I want to further people's understanding of psychology while also making it entertaining to listen to. Because at the time, in the late aughts, early teens, there were a lot of experts who were podcasters, right? And the ones that I liked not only had the expert talk about expert topics, but also had some care put to making it entertaining, making it interesting. YouTube, for those of you might remember this, like 10 years ago, if you just Googled psychology on YouTube, the vast majority of things that would come up would just be professors lecturing. And it would just be like a video camera in the back of the room or some very boring professor talking into a camera. And there would be a long introduction and the no icebreaker, no care to like the visual presentation. And it would be really hard to sit through those things, but sometimes I would, because it might be literally the only YouTube video about a defense mechanism or something. Well, you click on YouTube today, and there's so many different psychology content providers that make it so much more entertaining and snappy and visually interesting, And so I remember early in the podcast thinking, I don't want to be like those other content providers. I want to try to actually make it entertaining, which also, frankly, just gives me and Umberto an excuse to talk about Star Wars sometimes, because we just want to talk about Star Wars sometimes, that sort of thing. Anyway, all right. Well, that was a journey. Thanks for going on it with me. ChatGPT yourself. What does it say about you? And maybe in the future, or maybe even now, ChatGPT is more accurate. There's new versions or something. I don't know, but probably not. But it is interesting that I just asked Chat, and the fact. So let's honor the magic of ChatGPT of AI today. That it's not just a list of my resume or something. It actually writes it out in a way that flows like a regular old bio. You know what I mean? It has different categories of information. It kind of prioritizes it. It tries to make it a little pleasing to read or hear or something. So it really is magic that I'm sure in a few years people will think it's just a part of regular life, but I still marvel at it. I'm still like, wow, it's just so interesting. Oh, you know what I wanted to do? One last thing. Let's end it with. I wanted to, let me pull up ChatGPT here. Oh, but before we do that, actually, I did mention mission statement, and I did develop a mission statement, I don't know, a few years ago or something, and I thought I'd share it with you. So, the Psychology in Seattle podcast and YouTube channel's mission is to attempt to make the world a better place by providing educational and engaging content on psychology, psychotherapy, and culture. So there's that through line of the original mission statement of making it educational and engaging, right? I probably really played around with a lot of ideas of do I switch entertaining with engaging? So, I don't know why I landed on engaging, but there's that. But what I also wanted to do, and I've been wanting to do it for a long time, just out of curiosity, but I'll do it with you live on the microphone right now, is to ask ChatGPT to define certain psychological concepts, right? Because these AIs, they are pulling from the internet, right? Often, I think, and the internet is full of misinformation. So let's see, what should I ask it to define? Okay, so let's ask it to define codependency. Please define codependency. This is something that on the internet, in my anecdotal experience, 99% of what's publicly available is incorrect or suspect or something. Now, I do want to say that the concept of codependency isn't necessarily clearly defined by a consensus within our field, but it is fairly well understood in terms of where it comes from, at the very least. It comes from addictions. Anyway, so just reading it here, let's reserve our judgment. Codependency is a dysfunctional pattern of behavior and relationship in which a person excessively relies on another individual. Wrong. Typically a partner, family member, or close friend for their sense. What we're talking about is dependency. You're talking about over-dependency or dependent personality disorder. So codependency is a dysfunctional pattern of behavior and relationship in which a person excessively relies. You could easily argue that codependency is the opposite of that. Codependent people are typically the ones that dependent people are depending on. So typically a partner, family member, or close friend for their sense of self-worth, identity, and emotional well-being. In codependent relationships, one person often enables or supports the unhealthy or addictive behaviors of the other. Well, now you're actually talking about codependent people. Yeah. But this is what's on the internet. You will see this jumbling of two arguably opposite conditions where someone is overly dependent with someone who overly takes care of other people. How can that be in the same concept, right? You can't have overfunctioners and underfunctioners in the same category with related to the dimension of how they take care or be taken care of. So anyway, in codependent relationships, one person often enables or supports the unhealthy or addictive behaviors of the other while neglecting their own needs and sacrificing their own emotional and psychological well-being. Yeah, that is codependency, especially historically. And that first sentence does not align with the second. But I don't know. So that was just kind of funny. Somehow I thought the AI would be better than that. But so along those lines, if you rely on AI to help you with things, understand that it might not necessarily be accurate. And you wouldn't know it if you're not an expert on that topic yourself, which if you were, you wouldn't be asking an AI to tell you. So we're not at that point yet where we can trust that kind of thing. But anyway, actually, you know what? Let's just go to Wikipedia, codependency, Wikipedia. And here we are. Let's read this. In sociology, codependency is a theory that attempts to explain imbalanced relationships where one person enables another person's self-destructive behavior, such as addiction. Yeah, okay. I mean, that's not how I would word it. I certainly wouldn't say it's a part of sociology, but all right. I don't think it comes from there. I mean, certainly sociologists have researched it, but it comes from addiction. Yeah. So going on, definitions of codependency vary. Yeah. Tell me about it. But typically include high sacrifice. Yeah. A focus on others' needs. Yeah. Suppression of one's own emotions. Yeah. Depends. And attempts to control or fix other people's problems. Yeah, absolutely. Okay. So Wikipedia has it pretty well. History. The term codependency most likely developed in Minnesota in the late 1970s from co-alcoholic when alcoholism and other. Yeah. Okay. So Wikipedia seems to have right. I mean, it's worded a little oddly, maybe because of sociologists have seemingly edited this page. Let's see. This is in personality disorders. There's a tendency for loved ones of people with borderline personality disorder to slip into caretaker roles, giving priority and focus to the problems. Well, I mean, again, depends on your definition and how you look at it. So they're basically saying people with borderline are more susceptible to codependency, which is not my conceptualization. Or narcissism. Narcissistic personality disorder, with their ability to get others to buy into their vision and help them make it a reality, seek and attract partners who will put others' needs before their own. A codependent person can provide the narcissist. Yeah, okay. They only talk about those two personality disorders, and that would not be what I would, how I would characterize it. But anyway, all right, well, that was fun. Everyone, please take care of yourself truly, because you deserve it. And thank you for indulging me on my random meanderings. And take care of yourself truly, because you deserve it. You really, really do.